And we want to see that happen as soon as possible. All 48 hostages, both living and deceased, and there's some need to be released. And there's some logistical challenges to that we'll have to work through. But that work is happening even as I speak to you this very moment. The second part of it's even harder, and that is the long-term piece. What happens after Israel pulls back to the yellow line and potentially beyond that as this thing develops? How do you create this Palestinian technocratic leadership that's not Hamas, that's not terrorists, and with the help of the international community? How do you disarm any sort of terrorist groups that are going to be building tunnels and conducting attacks against Israel?
The world is waiting in a bated breath to see if Hamas will finally give back the hostages that they have never should have kidnapped on October 7. Our President Donald J. Trump gave them a final ultimatum, and that ultimatum is ending tonight. The world needs to know and see who is causing all the death and carnage and bloodshed in Gaza. It's not Israel, it's Hamas. This war could have ended October 8th if Hamas would have returned the hostages or not taken them to begin with. Well, let's listen to the Secretary of State, the 72nd Secretary of State, Mr. Marco Rubio, to see what his take is on the proposal that's on the table now. Let's watch it together and we'll talk about it afterwards. Kindly subscribe to our channel so a little bit of light will push away a lot of darkness.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Secretary Rubio, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you.
Well, I want to start with these peace negotiations in the Middle East. Is this now the end of the war in Gaza?
Well, not yet. There's some work remains to be done, and I would view it in two phases in terms of understanding how to break this out. The first piece of it, which was very clear from the letter and Hamas's response, is they have agreed to the president's hostage release framework. And what needs to happen now, and they acknowledge in the letter in their response, is there now needs to be meetings, which are occurring even as I speak to you now, and hopefully will be finalized very quickly on the logistics of that. What that means is, who goes in to get them? Is it Red Cross? When do they show up, et cetera? What place are they going to be? And the conditions have to be created for that to happen. You can't have bombs going off and fighting going on in the middle of this exchange. So that's piece one. The second, and we want to see that happen as soon as possible. All 48 hostages, both living and deceased, and there's some need to be released. And there's some logistical challenges to that we'll have to work through. But that work is happening even as I speak to you this very moment. The second part of it's even harder, and that is the long-term piece. What happens after Israel pulls back to the yellow line and potentially beyond that as this thing develops? How do you create this Palestinian technocratic leadership that's not Hamas, that's not terrorists, and with the help of the international community? How do you disarm any sort of terrorist groups that are going to be building tunnels and conducting attacks against Israel? How do you get them to demobilize? All that work, that's going to be hard, but that's critical, because without that, you're not going to have lasting peace. You may get the hostages back, you may get a cessation of hostilities, but in the long term, it's going to happen all over again. So both are going on at the same time, but priority number one, the one that we think we can achieve something very quickly on, hopefully, is the release of all of the hostages in exchange for Israel moving back to that yellow line, which is basically where they stood at the middle part of last month, of August. And that's the one we're focused on. Even as I speak to you now, there are people meeting on that.
I want to drill down on the timing of the hostages in just a moment. But first, just big picture. President Trump seems to be taking Hamas's response as a yes to his peace proposal. As you've indicated, though, there's a lot that still needs to be worked out. Hamas didn't mention laying down its arms, for example. Do you see Hamas's response as a yes to President Trump's peace proposal?
Well, it's certainly a yes to at least, look, it's Hamas, okay? So I'm not telling you here that these are people I trust 100%, nor should we. But they have said, basically, that they agreed to his proposal and the framework for releasing the hostages. That's an enormous achievement. They've also agreed, in principle and generalities, to enter into this idea about what's going to happen afterwards, the Palestinian technocrats, et cetera. There's a lot of details that are going to have to be worked out there. But look, this is a plan that the president put forward. But let's remember, it has the strong support of the UAE, of Qatar, of Egypt, of Saudi Arabia, the Turks, Indonesia, all these others. So there's a lot of international pressure on Hamas Hamas to make this happen. And we're going to need them and the European Union, and countries from around the world to also participate in making this thing work. So that second phase, the phase you're discussing, the disarmament, demobilization, that's not going to be easy. That's going to be hard, but it is really important because without demobilization, you're not going to have a lasting peace. A lot of work has to happen there, and we acknowledge that, and we want it to work out, and we're going to do everything we can to make it work.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has indicated he expects the hostages to be released as soon as this week. Is that your expectation, that the hostages will be released this coming week, Mr. Secretary?
I mean, I would like the hostages to have been released yesterday. Now, we need to work through the logistics of how that's going to happen. I mean, and again, that sounds simplistic, but it's not just about, you got to make sure that there's no fighting going on. You have to make sure the Red Cross can get there, what time they're going to be there, where they're going to be. All of that has to be worked through, and that's not easy in the middle of an active war zone. That has to be de-escalated, and that's exactly what they're meeting about right now. I mean, that's what the talks are about. That's what the high-level talks are going to be in Cairo tomorrow.
Mr. Secretary, they could be released this week?
Our expectation, yeah. We want it to be as soon as possible. There's no doubt about it. We want it as soon as possible. It needs to happen as quickly as possible. And we will know very quickly whether Hamas is serious or not by how these technical talks go in terms of the logistics. But absolutely, we want these hostages, all of them, living and deceased, released as soon as possible.
Let me ask you about Israel's role in this. Israel has not agreed to fully withdraw from Gaza. What is the time frame by which the United States wants to see that happen? Are we talking weeks, months, years?
No, listen, so first of all, they have agreed, and that's part of the release, to move back to the yellow line, which is what they've called it. It's basically where Israel stood in the middle of August. And so that they've agreed to that piece. And I think ultimately everyone has agreed, including Israel, that eventually at some point here, as this process plays out, Gaza will be governed by a Palestinian technocratic group that's not Hamas, that are not terrorists, with the help and the assistance and the guidance of an international consortium like the Board of Peace, etc. That is the goal. Everyone who signed on to this agreement has agreed to.
What's the time frame, though, Mr. Secretary?
But
weeks, months, years?
Well, that'll take. Yeah, no, in terms of, I mean, yeah, you can't set up a governance structure in Gaza that's not Hamas in 3 days. I mean, it takes some time. And when we ask Israel, okay, you're at the yellow line, now everything behind it, you have to turn it over. You have to have somebody to turn it over to. So, I mean, let's be realistic here. You can't just set up a sort of new governance structure inside of Gaza in 72 hours. It's going to take some time to do it. The important thing is that there's a plan, it's being executed, it has the money, it has the support, it has the expertise, and that it's moving forward, and everyone has agreed to the parameters of it. But that is ultimately the goal here, that everyone who signed on to President Trump's deal has agreed to.
Mr. Secretary, I want to read point 19 of the president's peace plan. I'll put it up so folks can see it. It says, quote, while Gaza redevelopment advances and when the Palestinian Authority reform program is faithfully carried out, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. Does the Trump administration now support Palestinian statehood, Mr. Secretary?
Well, look, first of all, that provision was very important to the countries that signed on with us, and Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, et cetera. They all really, that's a very important point to them. I think the most important point to read out of that is that you have to have somebody to turn it over to, right? Someone that you can hand that over to. We've always said that if there's going to be a two-state solution, it has to be negotiated with Israel. It has to make sure that Israel's security is taken into account. And so I would argue that I wouldn't say this is a new policy position. What I would say is, you want to be able to have in Gaza a place. Israel has no interest in governing Gaza. They want to turn it over to somebody, some organization that will govern it, that will not build tunnels and sponsor terrorism and come across the line and kidnap, rape, and murder Israelis. That's who they want to turn it over to. And right now that doesn't exist. That has to be built.
But, Mr. Secretary, in terms of where the administration stands, yes or no, does the Trump administration support
That's not a yes or no question.
Statehood?
That's a process. No, but that's not a yes or no question. That's a process. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we've always said this has been the consistent position of this administration, of myself, and of a lot of people that have watched this for a very long time. In order for that aspiration to even be credible, it has to be realistic. We can't have a Palestinian state that's governed by Hamas or by some terrorist organization whose stated purpose for existence is the destruction of the Jewish state. That would never work. Until Gaza is governed by people that are not interested in destroying Israel, until there are no security threats emanating against Israel from Gaza, forget about statehood. You're not going to have peace. So we have to create the conditions for that. That's going to take a while, and that's going to be part of what these negotiations are about in the days to come. But right now, the priority, number one, is to get the hostages released. If we can't even get an agreement on the hostages being released, you ain't going to have long-term peace here. So let's get that piece done. It's the most important, and then we can move to phase two, and it'll give momentum to the rest of the effort. But this is not going to be easy. No one said this is going to be easy. We are dealing with something that's been going on for a very long time.
All right. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, thank you very much for your time this morning. We really appreciate it.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.
Drums of war have been sounding. Carnage, death, senseless killings have been happening for 2 years. Now there's whispers of potential victory, of getting the hostages back dead and alive. I just cannot shake the memory of the same group, the Hamas, who said they're going to return the Bibas babies when they sent the coffins, and they were not the Bibas babies. The torture they put us through then. Do you remember that? This is the same group that marched the hostages through streets of Gaza with thousands of Palestinians cheering on October 7th. This is the same terror group, death cult, who has been torturing the hostages for over 780 days, almost 2 years. Do you really trust that they're going to follow through with this? I got to say, I got to be skeptical, because we're not dealing with humans. These are subhumans, monsters, terrorists, blood-soaked, death cult people. And they're going to drag this along as they can. I hope to be proven wrong, and I hope to be wrong. I hope to hear the news that the hostages have been returned dead and alive. But as our wonderful Secretary of State Marco Rubio just spoke, we're not dealing with negotiations with a normal group of people here. We're dealing with terrorists. We're dealing with terrorists whose whole mission is to annihilate Israel and to kill every single Jew and to wipe out Western society. And they make no secret about it. After October 7th, they have repeated that again and again and again, we're going to do this again, we're going to do this again, we're going to do this again. So we learned a lesson to believe them. When our enemy says we're going to come back and get you again, we trust them. Where did we learn that from? Well, let's look in the 30s, when Hitler began talking about making Europe Judenrein, making sure no Jews should be left alive in Europe. Well, he made good on his promise. At the time, no one thought it's realistic. No one thought he'll be able to do it. What could one madman possibly do? And here we are, 6 million dead later, gassed, tortured, murdered, mass shootings, mass graves, everything that happened during World War II. So we learned to believe our enemy. The only difference is now we have Israel, we have a defense force who can defend us against our enemies. I'm certainly hoping that the threat that Mr. Donald J. Trump and the USA said, that if the hostages are not returned, that all hell breaks loose. I hope we could follow through with that. You know, we have said that a few times. In the last few months, we have threatened them that all hell will break loose. Oh, you're not going to believe what's coming your way. Those are all threats. But, you know, I was listening earlier today to Douglas Murray, an English journalist, who was interviewed. He actually is a very respectable, and he wrote beautiful books, and very, very well-honored journalist. He actually went to Gaza himself after October 7 and saw for his own eyes what happened. His comments were that when there is a fire in your house, you don't want to bring it to 50% control, 75% control, or even 90% control. You don't want to leave 10% of the fire burning. You don't even want to leave some live embers. When you have to put a fire out, you got to put it out totally. Hamas has been a fire in our house. They have shown who they are. We have seen their ugly faces on October 7. Their barbarism that they showed us in the 21st century is worse than all warfare history. Such barbarism, such hideous crimes to humanity. I mean, to be able to torture humans the way they did it worse than the Nazis. They even was so proud about it, showing it off in the GoPro cams. They call up the parents bragging, look, I just snapped the baby's head off. Look, I just killed a mother and their children. Look, I just burnt babies in the ovens. I mean, this such barbarism that we never imagined the human brain or psychic could even stoop to such levels. The barbarism of breaking into a sovereign country on a quiet Saturday morning on a Jewish holiday and to butcher, kill, rape, behead, decapitate 1,200 beautiful innocent civilians, coming down on a musical festival and killing innocent young people and taking them hostage in the most barbaric, hideous way possible. How can we ever even think to negotiate with such monsters? These type of people don't deserve to be alive. They have lost their right of living by their actions and by their intentions. So we certainly hope that, the liberals who are chanting free Palestine from the river to the sea, think about it before you say who you are trying to annihilate. Who are you supporting? You are supporting such subhuman terrorist death cult? Is that who you want to side with in history? Is that who you want to support? Wait till it comes to a neighborhood near you. Why don't you take a trip down to Dearborn, Michigan, and spend a couple days there, and ask yourself a question. Is that really who you want to surround yourself with? How difficult it is to realize how Israel is trying to be a light unto the nations. Israel, for the last 77 years, after surviving the Holocaust, has done everything possible to land on its feet, to rehabilitate itself, to rebuild itself, to show the world that we are worth caring for, to show the world that we are worth being saved, to show the world that we are worth being defended. Because why? Because Israel has proven to the world that it has the ability to change the world's lifestyles for the better. Israel created the cutting edge recycling engineering of taking wastewater into drinking water. Water is one of the fundamental survival for human beings. In agriculture, Israel has introduced to the world ways never before, besides the little cherry tomatoes that the world never discovered till Israel brought it to the table, but the drip irrigation systems and the type of innovation and inventions in agriculture and the hydroponics of growing vegetables above ground. The list goes on and on. Just look at the technology, look at the medicine advances, look at the recent discoveries in spinal injuries, where Israel has broken grounds that surgeons have never been able to reach. Look what Israel has done with communication, instant messaging. You remember ICQ? That was the very first instant messaging created by Israel. The cell phone, the ability to talk through a cell phone, has Israel's chips and fingerprints in it. Travel, defense, academics, art, every area of humanity, Israel is at the cutting edge. We are doing this not for us, but for you, for the world. We have a mandate to be a light unto the nations. We want life. We want to live. We want peace. Why doesn't the world stand and support us, salute us, and defend us, and just let us do our thing, and you will benefit? The Abraham Accords has taught it to us that there is potential of the Arab countries living one-on-one peaceful with the Jewish people. It can be done, and it has been done. And those Arab nations who have recognized Israel's right to exist, have diplomatic relations, have benefited so much from it for their citizens. And this can continue. Let's hope that unconditional love should begin throughout the Middle East. Let's shake hands, let's make peace, and let's show the world that we can coexist. God bless you. God loves you.